Today's training will cover administering STAAR assessments for students receiving oral administration or students that are testing online. Staff members who will be administering oral administration must have extra training. With that, the 2019 oral/sign administration guidelines must be read and understood. The administrator must understand test security, what constitutes small group testing, understand the test administration, as well as the oral administration accommodations policy. Just as administering any STAAR assessment, test security must be followed. You have to ensure test security by making sure all security measures outlined in the STAAR test manuals are followed. The test administrator must sign the bottom portion of the oath regarding viewing secure materials. Pay attention to the oral administration's guideline, page 3, that discusses test security. When administering an oral administration assessment, the test administrator may not respond to test questions, make notes in the booklet, discuss the content, write notes or calculations in the test booklet, rephrase, clarify, or interpret any test content. Also, the personnel should not be giving any verbal or nonverbal assistance to the students at all. In other words, the administrator should not attempt to solve questions for themselves because the manner in which they read to the students will be affected and it may offer some assistance that the students are not supposed to get from the administrator who's reading the assessment to them. The magic rule of thumb for administering assessment with oral administration is that the manner in which the test questions are read should not aid students in selecting their answer. The entire purpose of having oral administration for students is to help them with comprehension that they cannot read themselves on their own. So the test administrator is providing it verbally so that the kids are hearing it rather than having to read it, but then we still want to test their comprehension. Also, your voice inflection needs to remain neutral except for words that are bolded, italicized, or printed some way that they are emphasized. You do not want to try to emphasize wording of your own choosing. You want to make sure that you are reading just as the booklet has printed for the students. Grouping for oral administration or small group students. For individual, it's a 1-to-1. If it's a small group, it's a 10-to-1 setting. With that small group, the number can go up to 12 students in the setting to one administrator. For booklets, the booklet that the test administrator is reading from has to match the same form number that the students are reading from. Generally, it is form 01. There are 3 types of oral administration that students can receive. There's a read all, where the test administrator must read the questions and answers in the choice they are presented all the way through. If a student at any time requests the questions to be read again, the test administrator has to wait until the entire assessment has been read fully one time before going back and then reading again for kids. There's also the per student request, which means that the student may allow the test administrator to know when they need a question or a word or phrase read to them. And then there's the change level setting where the student can let you know if they would like you to read their entire test or whether they would like to let you know when they need something read. So the test administrator must understand what setting that student gets, what type of oral administration, and it will be notated on the roster, and the test administrator must abide by that. In reference to the oral administration's guideline on page 4, it lets you know that if a student needs all the test questions read aloud, the test questions must be read aloud in the order they are presented, as I mentioned previously. Also, if the student is working through the assessment independently, requesting only certain words, phrases, or sentences to be read at various times, the test administrator will read aloud what the student requests when he or she requests it. The question is, what can be read? In regards to a math, science, or social studies assessment, anything that is printed on the page can be read aloud to the student. Keep in mind that the manner in which you read it should not aid the students in selecting their answer. In other words, for example, if there is a math question that is testing the student's ability to understand multiplication, if there's a dot in the place of an X, for example, the test administrator, instead of reading the multiplication sign as times, would pause for the multiplication symbol. In the oral administration guidelines, it outlines specific examples of how you want to read to the students for different subject areas so that you are not giving them any extra assistance outside of reading it to them for comprehension purposes. Also, students are allowed to be read to when it comes to their resources. So you can read from a dictionary to a student. Nonetheless, you cannot go and search for the word for the kid. If the kid wants you to read to them from the dictionary, they would have to go and find the word that they are looking for, and then you would read that to them. That goes for the same when it comes to reference materials. If the student wants you to read a formula, you would read the formula that they're asking for, but you want to make sure that you are not providing them any extra assistance. When it comes to writing assessments, on the editing portion, you may not read editing selections, test questions, or answer choices. If you do so, then you are aiding the student in selecting their answer for the editing portion. However, when it comes to the revising area of the writing assessment, you may read test questions, answer choices, as well as the writing prompt on that assessment. Please ensure that you are reading what is allowed and not reading what is not allowed. For reading assessments, because reading assessments are gauging what the students can comprehend when they read, the test administrator may never read the reading selections aloud to students. If a reading selection is embedded inside of a question, at that point the test administrator can read it because it is part of the question. However, reading selections alone may never be read aloud. The test administrator must give students time to read the selections themselves before reading the questions. The test administrator may not read the questions prior to a student reading the reading selection. The difficulty in giving an oral administration assessment in a small group setting is the way that a test administrator chooses to read. Whatever you choose to be your process for reading, you want to ensure that you inform the students before you begin the testing. The best practice is always reading over each individual student's shoulder so that you are meeting each student's needs. However, if you choose to read to the group, you will want to start off by reading the first question aloud and having the students raise their hand for the next question to be read aloud. At that point, you have to keep in mind that if you choose to read aloud, if you are reading a certain number, say number 2, and you have another student that is on a separate question, when you are reading aloud, that can distract the other students. So you want to make sure that you are not trying to pace the students together, and you want to make sure that everybody's needs are being met. However you choose to do that is your decision. However, you want to make sure again that you are meeting the students' individual needs. As I mentioned before, oral administration test administrators must have had additional training, which is the training you are listening to now. You must understand what constitutes a test question. You must also read test questions aloud in the order they are presented. Of course, this is for students that are getting the read all administration. You must sign the appropriate portion of the oath. So whenever this training is complete, you will stop by my office to sign the sign-in sheet saying that you understand your role, as well as sign the portion of the oath that is for oral administration and view and secure content. Also, the test administrator must read aloud any word, phrase, or sentence in the test questions and the answer choices as many times as needed. Most importantly, the test administrator must be familiar with content specific terms and symbols associated with the subject area assessment. You want to pre read questions before you read them aloud to the students so that you are not confusing them when you read. And at the end of the assessment, you may go back to reread any question and its answer choices in any order at the student's request. As I mentioned before, the 2019 Oral Administration Guidelines need to be read and understood. If you are receiving this training, you are now being trained for oral administration. However, if for sure you are placed in an oral administration classroom, I will have a printed copy of this available for you once the rosters are made and complete. If you have any questions regarding this training so far, as well as anything in the oral administration guidelines, you will want to contact myself with any questions before you have the assessment and those students sitting in front of you. Now we are going to address students that test online. There is not a big difference in administering these assessments, but I am going to go through a couple slides that will address how the students test online. So the first thing, what do you need? You need charged Chromebooks. You need a test ticket for each student. This is, of course, where the student will, or what the student would use to log into the test. You need scratch and graph paper. You need dictionaries and calculators when applicable, depending on what test is being administered. And if there are any students in your session that are receiving text to speech, which is oral administration online, they will need headsets. Headsets will be provided. More than likely, they will be already placed in the classroom that you are testing in before testing. In regards to starting the test, just as I mentioned in the other STAAR training, you do need to read the guide to the administration directions. This lets you know what you are going to read for the kids, what you're going to read to yourself, so that whenever you are reading directions to the kids, you understand how you need to read the material and what you need to understand for yourself. If you are administering a test online, the page that you need to bookmark to read to the kids begins on page 59. Again, you need to ensure that you read all instructions to students that you are assigned to depending on what type of group you have. There are parts inside of the directions that say for students receiving oral administration. Then there are also a part that says, or there is also a part that says for students that are receiving extra time. You want to make sure that you know what kind of group you have so that you can read the directions appropriately for the kids. Again, we want to make sure we are not at any point deviating from the manual. The manual is there for us to read from, not to freestyle what we want to say for the day to the kids. To start the test, the kids need to open up the Chromebook. In the bottom left hand corner where there are apps, you want to have the kids click apps, and then they're going to click STAAR Online Testing Platform. From there, it'll open up a secure browser where the kids will use their test tickets to log in. The biggest thing is making sure that the kids receive the correct test tickets. So part of you reading the directions tells the kids to check their name, make sure their information is correct, and you want to verify all of this before you have the students log into the test. Again, this was also mentioned in the previous STAR training. To start the test, an announcement will be made. Our target start time is 9 o'clock. The test administrator may read the directions as many times as students need to. The time does not start for kids until you have said you may begin. Again, students may use scratch and graph paper, although they will not receive an actual booklet to write in. The test ticket can be used as scratch paper, so you can have them write all over that, and then they will also get pencils. Starting the test. Content and language supports. This allows for kids to get some vocabulary help. If you click the link that is inside the PowerPoint, it will take you to this document that explains the different types of content and language supports that kids will get. Also, in page 59, once again on page 59, that's where the directions start for you to read from. It does allow you to freestyle a little bit. So if you read your materials, you'll understand how you can freestyle and for what reason you would freestyle directions to the kids. I mentioned freestyle on the previous slide. So for example, inside of your manual, it says for students receiving text to speech, the test administrator is allowed to remind students that a do not read icon next to selections or test questions will indicate that all text on the page cannot be read aloud to the student. This includes text and pop-ups and rollovers if applicable. So in other words, on a reading assessment, for example, the student cannot get the reading passage read to them. So if you let the kids know that the do not read icon lets them know that they will not get read to, the kids won't have any questions during testing. If a student is allowed text to speech, the kid's test ticket is already equipped with the text to speech feature. If a kid does not get text to speech, then their test will not have the text to speech feature. However, for extra time, online assessments do not time students out after 4 hours. So the test administrator that is giving giving an online test for students that do not have extra time will have to stop the kids at the 4 hour mark. If students do get extra time, although you're not keeping track of time for the kids while they're testing, you will need to indicate this on your seating chart so that I can go into the computer system and indicate whether or not the student took longer than the 3 hours. In regards to student breaks during testing that are testing online, if a student is going to the restroom or taking a short break for any reason, all you have to do is have the student use their test ticket to cover their computer screen because they'll come right back and finish up where they left off at. However, if a student is going to lunch, you want to have the students log out of their test, shut the Chromebook down so that we can preserve the battery as well as maintain test security. You will collect student test tickets when they go to lunch and lock them up just as you would booklets and answer documents. As students finish assessments on the Chromebooks, you want to collect their test tickets because that is a secure document. Any test material, so any scratch paper, formula charts, all those sorts of things, you want to collect them from the students. You want to place them inside of your tote tray separated for me so that I can dispose of them properly. At the end of the 4 hours, as I mentioned previously, if a student does not have extra time, you need to instruct them to submit their test, and you need to ensure that you are making sure that the kids do go ahead and submit their test at that time. If the students have extra time, instead of you putting the 4 hours up, what you might want to do is have the 3 hour limit in your mind somewhere so that you know that if a kid finishes after a certain amount of time, then you need to indicate it on your seating chart so that, again, I can go into the computer system and update their information in regards to how much time they took to test. Now that you have watched this training in its entirety, you are going to take a 20 question quiz in which you must get a 90% or higher, and you only have 2 attempts. If you do not make that 90% after that second attempt, you will be required to attend a training with me face to face in regards to oral administration and online testing. Good luck.